We have all heard the terms over the last few years, neurodevelopment, neuroplasticity, rewiring of the brain, and creating new neural pathways. We've been hearing about this because we now know we can change the brain. It's pretty incredible. But actually, we've known about this for more than 15 years. Unfortunately, there's something I refer to as the great disconnection. It's the disconnection between what is happening in neuroscience, what the hospitals and doctors are doing, how our education system is handling children with some type of brain disorder, and the children that so desperately need the immediate care and help. I would like to start by telling you a personal story about this little guy, Henry. Henry is my youngest son, and actually his full name is Henry Robert Harper Vossen. I'm telling you this because I didn't intend for his initials to be HRH, although His Royal Highness is suitable for him. And knowing that, I had to, of course, add a little crown on his birth announcement, not knowing at the time how symbolic that crown would become. It is now being used as the logo for the Neurodevelopment Centre that we are creating in his name, the Henry Vossen Neurodevelopment Centre. Henry was born a gorgeous, happy little boy. He had play dates like everyone else, went to school 3 times a week, and played with his brothers and sisters, Riley and Lulu. But all of that changed in December of 2010. Henry suffered an asthma attack, and we took him to the hospital in Hong Kong. This is Henry the day before he had his asthma attack. It's very special to me as it was the last photo that was taken before his life changed. And for me, it looks like he's holding up his finger and saying, "Don't worry, Mama, I'm coming back soon." The details of what happened to Henry next will have to be told at a later date. But Henry suffered hypoxia and cerebral edema. He was in a coma. And they told us he would most likely be brain dead and never do anything again. He came out of his coma and we were told that he may never walk or talk or go to school or do anything like his brothers and sisters. It was very difficult. What we didn't realize is that, like all of you here today, we safely assumed that with everything going on in neuroscience, that there would be a great deal of support and guidance on where to go and what to do. There wasn't. The 2 things that got me through this were this little photo of Henry, letting me know that he would be back soon, and this piece of artwork. When my son Henry was in his coma and we didn't know whether he was going to live or die, we went home quickly to light a candle and hug our 2 older children. My older son, Riley, disappeared for a moment, and my husband went to find him. He found him sitting at the kitchen table making this drawing and asked him what it was. And he told his father it was a compass. When we asked him why he drew a compass, he said it was so that Henry could find his way home. It was a difficult moment. And this drawing was taped to Henry's hospital bed for the next 3 weeks. My mother has always said it's not the load you're given, but how you carry it. And that saying stuck in my head, and I knew the only thing I could do was handle this in the best way possible. But nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. This great disconnection between neuroscience, doctors, and children with brain disorders or some sort of brain injury was huge. We called around everywhere we could and couldn't find anyone to help us. We were left with simply trying physio, speech, and occupational therapy. But how many times a day, how many times a week, we had no idea. I just knew that each day was important, and every day I wanted to be doing something to get Henry back to what he was. We started to call around in Hong Kong, and not one therapist could spend more than once or twice a week with him. We still had our tickets to come to Switzerland, where we were supposed to spend our Christmas holiday. So I made some phone calls here and found a wonderful woman in Verbier named Marie Blangine from Biosport. She told me to bring Henry to her and she would do physiotherapy with him 2 times a day, every day. We got on the plane after quickly seeing all the doctors to make sure he was safe to fly, and I was safe to fly. And I got on the plane with what I referred to as a newborn in a 2-year-old body, and it was extremely difficult. Marie held true to her promise and did physiotherapy 2 times a day, every day, at 9 in the morning and at 4. And Henry started to walk. And this was the first time my husband and I realized that through repeating emotion again every day, we could actually change Henry's brain. We went back to Hong Kong on a mission. But we were still faced with that same problem that not one therapist would do more than once or twice a week with him. I couldn't understand how the therapist didn't know what I knew and what I had been reading. I started to read many books, so did my husband, and we watched many TED Talks on neuroplasticity. But nobody else seemed to be applying what they were writing and talking about. At one point, I was managing 8 to 9 therapists a week just to try and get the 3 therapies a day. And despite all my efforts and despite the amount of therapists, most days I failed. And I knew that this was not sustainable. This is when I first started dreaming of the Emily Vossen Neurodevelopment Centre. I wanted one place to go to support us, to guide us, to help Henry get his daily therapy consistently every day without missing a beat, and where we had access to all the latest that was happening in neuroscience. There's a huge gap between what we know about the brain and what we do about it. So we left Hong Kong and came to Switzerland, but we faced some of the same frustrations. My husband ended up getting in contact with a man named Marty Wutka from a brain institute in the States, and we convinced him to come to Switzerland. He came here and stayed with us for 3 weeks, and we had a crash course on the brain. We spent every day learning about the brain, how to repair it, and about the neurodevelopmental program that he was putting our son on. He was the first person to offer guidance and help, the first person who truly knew what he was talking about, but didn't just know what we could do about the brain, he knew how to apply it. I'm going to give you a little lesson now, which I believe everyone, especially people in hospitals, doctors in hospitals, and educators should know about the brain. The therapy program that Henry started targeted 4 areas of development: neurodevelopment, physiological, learning style, emotional, behavioral, and social, optimizing the strengths of the child and addressing the weaknesses. If you look at the brain of a child, or all of us, the neurodevelopment happens when your neural pathways connect in a certain sequence from birth. Your 5 systems, or your 5 senses get put in place, and then your 3 systems. And this is the foundation for which everything else builds on top of. Understanding environment, understanding self, and from there you deal with your threats, your comforts, emotion, memory, communication, belief, interaction, and language. So it makes sense that if you have some type of brain disorder, whether you have cerebral palsy or autism, traumatic brain injury, developmental delays, or simple learning disability, that you would go back to the beginning and make sure that your 5 senses and your 3 systems are in place, but in place solid. Marty described to us that it was like building a house. If you didn't lay the foundation down well, you could build the walls and the roof, but eventually they would all come tumbling down until you went back and laid the foundation down properly. In Henry's case, it was very obvious to us, and it made so much sense. They had taken his brain, and it was damaged. And the way it was described to us is that his whole brain suffered what happened. In most children, when they have a brain injury like this, there's focal points. But he had a few brain injuries in a 48-hour period, and his whole brain suffered. So as we started to progress with Henry, it meant that a tiny part of Henry's brain had managed to take over the functions of the rest of his brain. It's incredible for me still to think about. So now that you have your lesson on the brain, hopefully everyone leaving here today will go to doctors, in the hospitals and educators and help them understand this simple, basic piece of information that can help all of us, not just for children, but if someone suffers a stroke or has a ski accident, this is very important. So our method for repairing Henry's brain became using neurofield, which Marty had also taught us about, which is an electric stimulation of the brain, doing his neurodevelopmental therapy program, which consisted of 3 therapists a day just to mimic the movements necessary to get his 3 systems in place. And we did 3 hours of training a day. We had a lot of success. Each day we saw progress in Henry. At the beginning, just a simple massage that Marty taught us about putting pressure from your toes towards your heart and your fingers towards your heart helped Henry immediately. We had been to 3 different hospitals with different doctors, and not one of them shared this piece of information with us. We were desperate. Henry was slamming his head into the walls, into the floor. In a car, he would reach up and slam his head into the glass window. And we were on a 24-hour watch for seizures. He was at high risk of seizures, and it was terrifying. And I couldn't figure out, how did it take this guy Marty? He wasn't a doctor. He knew a lot about the brain. But why did it take 8 months and us finding him to get something simple as a little massage we could do that would help Henry? It seemed too simple for everyone else not to know this. I've added in here that later we learned about glutathione being the fuel for the brain. So our method increased to adding glutathione nebulized that he did along with the neurofield and neurodevelopment. So here we are with our Neurodevelopment Centre, that place that I was talking about. One place that is sustainable for a child and their family to consistently receive the best therapy and care under one roof over a long period of time. We know that we can change the brain, but it takes time. And children need and deserve a place where there's the balance between nature and neuroscience where they can get this done, where they can get an intense therapy program done daily, plus have access to everything that is available in neuroscience. We found that place in Roswell, Georgia. It was a difficult place for us to imagine going to, but we eventually went. It was a wonderful woman named Amy Odell, who's the founder of Jacob's Ladder. And we decided to go for the summer to see what it was about. At Jacob's Ladder, Henry got his daily therapy, which became 6 hours a day, plus he had access to neurofield, neurofeedback, chromotherapy, and everything else you could imagine that could help the brain. We hired a wonderful girl with a background in ABA, which is Applied Behavioral Analysis. She was from New York. Her name was Molly Wong, and we credit her for some of the most incredible work that she did with Henry. He started to talk. Molly came back to Hong Kong with us, and for a year, she did 6 hours a day with him. When we checked back into Switzerland a year later at the University Hospital, doing his yearly developmental assessment, Henry had improved 18 months in a 10-month period because of what we had done. We were all amazed. The hospital had never seen results like this and couldn't understand it. They were the ones that had described Henry's brain as being wholly damaged. So just a tiny part of his brain was managing to do all of these things. When we found this news out, we realized that if we could do this remotely, imagine what progress we could make if we were at the center. So we moved to Roswell, Georgia. And I'm sorry to laugh when I say that, but it was about as far away as anything we knew. And I have been around the world. But Roswell, Georgia was not on my list. It now should be for everyone because it is an incredible place, and Amy Odell is an amazing woman that has helped us a lot. Henry can now run, ride a horse. He can ski amazingly. There's a wonderful woman, Charlotte Dessinger at L'École Suisse de Ski in Verbier, that we said, please just take him out between your legs and stimulate him. We never imagined he would actually ski. She called me one day and said, you've got to come down, your son is skiing. And I said, yes, I know. You're with him. And she said, no, he's skiing. I arrived and she was in tears as we watched Henry go down the little slope at Les Isères. That was a year ago. This past year, or a year and a half ago, this past year, Henry went down the right side, and by himself, he can go down the mountain. He can also swim, and he loves swimming because I think he loves the peace of being under the water. There's a great film called Immortal Beloved that I always think about Mozart. Oh. Thanks. And there's a scene where he's in a lake, and he's lying there, and you can tell for the first time that he has peace from the static that was going on inside, static that created amazing music. And I know that that's how Henry feels. We still have a long way to go. So knowing this story, what is next? What do you think is next? I like to always go back to the source. So the source would be teaching our children about their brains. Doesn't that make sense? Before we teach them about math and music and art and sports, teach them about their brains and how they work and how important it is to exercise them, especially between the ages of 1 to 10. Help them understand why it's important to have good nutrition for the brain and to exercise the brain as much as possible. There's a wonderful woman, Joanne Deek, that wrote 2 fantastic books, Your Fantastic Elastic Brain for 5 to 8-year-olds, and the owner's Manual for Driving Your Adolescent Brain for 9 to 14-year-olds. I strongly recommend you all get them, not just for your children, but for yourselves, because these 2 books have the most basic knowledge that we should all know about our brains. The second thing we need to do is reevaluate how our hospitals and doctors and schools handle children with brain disorders, and start applying now what we already know about the brain. The way I see it, what we've been through, is the hospitals, doctors, and our education system are 15 years behind what the neuroscientists knew long ago. They've never caught up, and I don't understand that. If we were to open neurodevelopment centers now, we could immediately apply what we've known for a long time and stay caught up with the latest happenings. I'd like to actually back up for 1 second and to talk about the schools. At the moment, around the world, children with special needs get integrated into regular schools that are under pressure and cannot cope with children like this, and the children aren't getting what they need. If we had neurodevelopment centers where these children could go, it wouldn't just benefit the Henrys or children with autism or cerebral palsy. It would also benefit any child with any type of learning disorder. We could evaluate them, get programs, and help support the schools. And that's the way I see it happening, instead of putting pressure on the schools to do something they're not equipped to do. The third thing we need to do is create neurodevelopment centers in every city, in every town, in every country around the world. The way that I see it is that every town has a population of children that you have to provide a school for. In that same sense, we need to take an amount of schools and provide a neurodevelopment center for the children that need it and the schools that need the support. This is Henry now. He's doing extremely well because of all the hard work we have done over the last 4 years. But it shouldn't have been this hard, and it shouldn't have been this difficult on myself, my family, or Henry. We should have had that place to go right out of the hospital instead of having to take a precious time when he should have been getting that immediate therapy, instead of us having to search around the world to find what was necessary. I'd like for all of you to take a minute and close your eyes and think about what it would be like if you, your brother, your sister, your child, your mother, anyone you love and hold close to your heart, suffered a brain injury or was diagnosed with some type of brain disorder. What would you want? Or better yet, what would you expect? Knowing what the neuroscientists are doing, knowing what is happening today and even 15 years ago, what would you expect to have happen when you left the hospital? I'm sorry for the harsh reality of what I've been saying, but the guidance and support isn't there like we imagine it would be. It's very disconnected. There are wonderful people in random places around the world doing things with clinics and centers, but what it needs to be is one center where you offer everything. And like I said before, a brain injury takes time. So you need a place that you can go every single day to get this done. It's been 4 years with Henry. We've made great progress, but we still have a long way to go. And I still want and expect for him to be able to have the same rights as my other 2 children, to be in a learning environment with other children, and that balance between nature and neuroscience, where he has beautiful grounds to run around and play and benefit from nature, but where he also has access to the latest happening in neuroscience. I'm going to leave you, oh, I love that photo. I'm going to leave you now with a short little video of Henry saying, "Papa." It's an important one for me to share, and to share with all the doctors out there that told me that Henry would never talk again. Oops. Sound. Oh, that's okay. You could see his mouth moving, and elsewhere he said, "Papa." Thank you.